Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into something a little different. And by different, I mean stepping into the sandals of someone whose life is about to spiral from I just need to survive winter to I'm accidentally running an ancient pharmaceutical cartel. You've just survived your first brutal Roman winter, and like scrolling through WebMD at 3 AM convinced you have 17 different terminal diseases, you're about to discover something that will either save your life or completely destroy it. Spoiler alert, probably both. At the same time, while Roman authorities try to crucify you for your healthcare choices. So before we dive into this historical mess that makes Breaking Bad look like a kid's show, hit that like button if you enjoy these deep dives into how our ancestors dealt with problems that would make modern people call their therapist, their lawyer, and possibly the FBI. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing who else is awake at ungodly hours learning about ancient drug dealers who probably had better work-life balance than most of us. Now dim those lights, maybe grab a warm drink that's definitely not opium-laced wine, or is it? And let's walk together into a world where your biggest winter survival hack might just get you executed. Fun times ahead. You wake in darkness to the sound of your own chattering teeth. It's 168 AD, and congratulations, you've just experienced what Romans politely called a challenging season, and what we'd call nature actively trying to murder you with hypothermia while laughing about it. The apartment you rent in the Subura, think ancient Rome's version of a sketchy neighbourhood where property values are measured in how many stabbings per week. Isn't exactly what real estate agents would call luxury accommodation. It's more like a studio apartment had a baby with a medieval dungeon, and that baby was raised by wolves who didn't believe in heating systems. Your bed, and I'm using that term so loosely it's practically a suggestion, is basically a wooden frame with a straw mattress that's seen better centuries. We're talking about a mattress that's less memory foam and more collective trauma foam. The blankets piled on top of wool when you can afford wool, or whatever animal hides you've managed to scavenge that don't smell like something died in them. Which, let's be honest, something probably did die in them. Multiple somethings, recently. The air in your room is sharp enough to cut glass, diamonds, and possibly your will to live. Each breath creates a little cloud of fog, like you're vaping disappointment and poverty. Your nose stings with each inhalation, not the pleasant winter wonderland sting from Christmas movies, but the my face might actually fall off sting that suggests your body is having serious regrets about this whole being alive in ancient Rome during winter thing. Here's a fun Roman fact that'll make you appreciate your thermostat. Central heating existed in 168 AD, but only for people rich enough to afford hypocausts, basically underfloor heating systems that were the Tesla of ancient climate control. They worked by having slaves maintain fires that heated air flowing under your floors. Very efficient, very expensive, very not for you. Everyone else, meaning you and about 95% of Rome's population, got to experience what historians politely call seasonal mortality challenges, and what you're currently experiencing as, why are my fingers blue and is that normal? You don't jump out of bed immediately because you're not a complete idiot. Leaving the relative warmth of your blanket cocoon is like voluntarily choosing to be stabbed by thousands of invisible ice demons who are personally offended by your decision to exist. So you lie there for a while, summoning the courage to face another day of winter survival in an empire that conquered the known world, but apparently couldn't conquer the concept of affordable heating for the working class. The window, which is actually a luxury in itself, don't get too excited, is just oiled paper stretched across a wooden frame. Real glass windows? That's rich people nonsense, like having more than one pair of shoes or eating meat more than once a month. Through the translucent barrier that's about as effective at blocking cold as thoughts and prayers, you can see the weak, watery light of a Roman dawn that looks about as enthusiastic about existing as you feel. It's the kind of light that seems to apologise for existing, like, sorry about this whole sunrise thing, I know you were hoping to just die peacefully in your sleep, but here we are. Your first challenge of the day, getting dressed without dying of exposure. Roman winter fashion was all about layers, think onion. But if the onion was made of scratchy wool, animal fur and broken dreams, you start with a tunica that's basically a long shirt that goes down to your knees, then you add another tunica because one is never enough when you're trying to prevent hypothermia. Then a cloak that might have once been waterproof before it became whatever sad fabric situation it currently is. You're basically wearing your entire wardrobe at once, which is fine because your entire wardrobe consists of like 4 items total. The result makes you look less fashionable Roman citizen and more ambulatory laundry pile, but at least you're a warm ambulatory laundry pile. Warmish. Okay, less frozen than you would be naked. But here's where our story takes a turn from man survives winter to man makes questionable life choices that will define his entire future. You're not just cold, you're in pain. Real pain. The kind that makes you question whether life is worth living, or if you should just throw yourself into the Tiber River and call it a day. Not the, oh, I slept wrong and my neck hurts kind of pain that modern people complain about before taking ibuprofen and moving on with their lives. We're talking chronic, soul-crushing, every movement is agony kind of pain that makes you understand why ancient people believed in vengeful gods who specifically targeted individual humans for torment. Because clearly someone up there has decided that your left leg is their personal entertainment. Maybe it's an old injury from your brief stint in the legions, where you learned that military service was less glory and honour, and more walking until your feet bleed while carrying equipment that weighs more than you do. Maybe it's arthritis from years of manual labour in conditions that would violate every workplace safety law that won't be invented for another 2,000 years. Maybe it's just the general agony of being a human being with a body in an era before modern medicine, when medical care often meant pray harder and maybe bleed yourself for balance. Your leg, let's say your left leg, because suffering deserves specificity, screams every time you put weight on it. And I don't mean a gentle complaint like, hey, maybe don't do that. I mean a full-throated protest that shoots up from your knee like someone's playing a very aggressive, very unpleasant tune on your nervous system using hammers and hatred. The winter cold makes it 10 times worse, 20 times worse, infinity times worse. It's like your knee has its own personal winter that's even more brutal than the actual winter everyone else is experiencing. And sleep? Oh, let's talk about sleep. Or rather, let's talk about the complete absence of sleep. You've been averaging maybe 2 hours a night, interrupted by the delightful combination of cold, because your apartment is approximately the same temperature as a meat locker. Pain, because your leg has decided that nighttime is when it really wants to make its opinions known. The charming sounds of urban Roman nightlife, including but not limited to drunk patricians having philosophical debates that turn violent stray dogs fighting over garbage. Other tenants are doing things that are best not imagined. The occasional political assassination it's an election year. Cartwheels on cobblestones, ancient Rome's version of traffic noise. Random screaming, could be anything from childbirth to murder, who knows? It's like trying to sleep in a city that never learned about noise ordinances, while someone uses your skeleton as a xylophone and your nervous system as a warning system that won't shut up about everything being terrible. 2 hours of sleep. Per night. For weeks, you're not living, you're existing. There's a difference, and you're intimately familiar with it. Roman medical care in 168 AD was, let's call it, optimistic. Physicians existed, sure. They had credentials and everything. But their treatment methods ranged from surprisingly effective to, why not just sacrifice yourself to Mars and save everyone the trouble? For your specific problem, chronic pain and insomnia, Roman medicine offers several exciting options. Option 1, bloodletting. The theory, your humours are out of balance. The solution, remove some blood until the balance improves. The reality, you're already exhausted and in pain, and now you're also anemic. But hey, at least your humours are balanced. They're not. Option 2, herbal concoctions. Various plants mixed with wine, creating beverages that taste like regret mixed with tree bark and false hope. Some of them work a little bit. Most of them work not at all. All of them taste like punishment for sins you didn't commit. Option 3, moral improvement. The physician suggests that your pain is obviously caused by moral failings, and you should try being more virtuous. Maybe attend more religious ceremonies. Maybe donate to temples. Maybe stop doing whatever you're doing that's angering the gods enough that they've decided your leg should be their personal torture device. This is extremely helpful advice if your problem is being a bad person. Less helpful if your problem is damaged cartilage and nerve pain. Option 4, just endure it. This is the most popular option, mainly because it's free. Romans are big fans of Stoicism, the philosophy that says suffering builds character and complaining about it is for weak people who don't understand that pain is actually good for you somehow. It's like toxic positivity but ancient and with more acceptance of meaningless suffering as a virtue. Modern people complain when their Wi-Fi is slow, when their food delivery takes too long, when their favourite streaming service raises prices by $2. You're dealing with medical advice that essentially amounts to, have you tried not being in pain, and maybe the gods are mad at you, and suffering is actually good, you should do more of it. The healthcare system is not great. We can all agree on this. But here's where our story takes a turn that would make the DEA very nervous if they existed yet. Word travels fast in the Subura, especially word about solutions to problems that everyone has but no one talks about. It's like ancient Rome's version of encrypted messaging, except the encryption is just don't say anything too specific and hope nobody's listening. And the word you're hearing, whispered in taverns and back alleys like people discussing forbidden knowledge or stock tips, that are definitely insider trading, is about a man named Philippos. Philippos is what we might politely call an alternative healthcare provider. What Romans less politely call a dealer in forbidden substances. What we'd call your friendly neighbourhood drug dealer but with a doctorate in street pharmaceuticals. He's not advertising his services on papyrus billboards, if you know what I mean. There's no opium, get your opium here, ask about our winter specials sign hanging outside his apartment. His business model relies more on word of mouth and plausible deniability. Finding Philippos requires the kind of social networking that makes LinkedIn look straightforward. It's like using the dark web, except the web is made of actual human connections and the dark part is literal because you're meeting people in shadowy corners of the city after legitimate businesses have closed for the night. You spend days following leads that go nowhere, talking to people who claim they've never heard of anyone named Philippos, while simultaneously giving you just enough information to suggest they definitely have heard of someone named Philippos, and maybe you should try talking to this other person who also definitely hasn't heard of him. It's like the world's most frustrating treasure hunt, except the treasure is illegal drugs and the map is a series of vague hints from people who are professionally paranoid about Roman law enforcement. Roman cities were perfect for this kind of underground economy, though. Narrow streets that twist like intestines designed by a drunk architect. Confusing layouts where addresses are more suggestions than locations. Buildings packed together like ancient urban Tetris, where nobody can agree on which piece goes where. Plus, law enforcement in the Subura focused mainly on preventing actual riots and murder sprees, not investigating every suspicious conversation between citizens. The urban prefect's office had bigger problems than Guy trying to find pain medication through unconventional channels. Finally, after a week of playing ancient detective, which is like being a modern detective except everything is harder and nobody's invented forensics yet, you get an address, not a street address, because Romans weren't that organised with their urban planning. More like directions that sound like riddles from a fairy tale. Third building past the baker with the burned hand, up the stairs that creak like a dying cat, knock 3 times and ask for Marcus. Why Marcus? Who's Marcus? Is Philippos actually Marcus? Or is Marcus a code word? Or is there a real Marcus who screens visitors? You don't know. Nobody explains these things. You're just supposed to understand how illegal drug procurement works through cultural osmosis. The building looks like it's held together by stubbornness, architectural prayer, and possibly dark magic. Roman apartment buildings, called insulae, which sounds nicer than they actually were basically ancient death traps. Multiple stories of wooden construction, overcrowded like a clown car designed by someone who hates both clowns and car safety, prone to fire, and built by contractors who apparently learned engineering from fortune cookies and fever dreams. The one you're looking for fits this description perfectly. It's the kind of building that makes you grateful for modern fire codes, building inspectors, and the general concept that structures should be designed to not collapse and kill everyone inside. Climbing the stairs is an adventure in itself. Each step announces your presence with creaks and groans that sound less like stairs and more like the building providing live commentary on your poor life choices. The sounds are so specific and so loud that you're pretty sure everyone in the building knows exactly where you are and what you're doing. Not great for operational security, but these are the stairs you have, not the stairs you wish you had. The smell is indescribable. Imagine if Desperation had a scent, mixed it with cooking oil from various unidentifiable sources, some of which might not be food, added human waste from the communal toilet situation that's exactly as bad as you're imagining, and let the whole thing ferment for a few decades while nobody ever cleaned anything. It's the kind of smell that makes you understand why wealthy Romans used perfume so extensively. Not because they wanted to smell nice, because they needed industrial-strength olfactory protection from everything around them. The door you're looking for is unmarked, naturally. Because if you're running an illegal pharmaceutical operation, the last thing you want is a convenient label that helps law enforcement find you. So it's just a door. One of many doors. You're going based on up the stairs, third on the left, or was it fourth? And hoping you're not about to knock on some random person's door and have to explain why you're asking for Marcus. You knock 3 times, as instructed, feeling ridiculous, but also desperate enough to play along with whatever elaborate security theatre is required. The sound echoes in the narrow hallway like you're knocking on the door to a different world, which in a way you are. Marcus, you whisper, feeling like you're in a badly written play, but also not knowing what else to do. The door opens just wide enough for an eye to appear, literally just an eye, like something out of a cartoon, except this is your actual life now. The eye examines you with the thoroughness of a Roman customs official who suspects you're smuggling something but isn't sure what. It's taking in your appearance, desperate, your desperation level, very high, your ability to pay for services, questionable but probably manageable, and whether you seem like an informant or undercover law enforcement, hopefully not. Who sent you? The voice belongs to someone who's clearly had this conversation many times and knows exactly how it goes. You mention the name you were given, another shadowy figure in the chain of referrals that led you here like a game of telephone, except everyone's whispering and nobody wants to be too specific. The eye considers this information, disappears for a moment while you stand in the hallway, wondering if you're about to be rejected or accepted into whatever this is. Then the door opens wider to reveal a man who looks exactly like you'd expect an ancient drug dealer to look. Philippos is thin in the way that suggests he samples his own products for quality control purposes. Not starving thin or sick thin, but the kind of thin that comes from a metabolism fueled by substances that reduce appetite and increase energy. He's probably your age, maybe a little older, but with the kind of face that's learned to reveal nothing while simultaneously evaluating everything about the person standing in front of him. His clothes are better than yours, not fancy enough to attract thieves or attention from authorities, but definitely a step up from ambulatory laundry pile. He's clearly making money from this operation, but he's smart enough not to advertise that fact through conspicuous consumption. The apartment behind him is small but comfortable in ways that yours isn't. There's actual furniture beyond the bare necessities, decorations that suggest disposable income and personal taste, and most importantly it's warm. He's got a brazier going that fills the space with genuine heat, not just the theoretical possibility of warmth that you've been living with. You immediately want to live here. This is not part of the pharmaceutical transaction, but it's definitely a strong secondary motivation. Painful winter, Philippos asks, and it's not really a question. He can probably diagnose your entire situation from the way you walked up his stairs, the way you favour your left leg, the exhaustion written across your face in letters large enough for a blind person to read, the desperate quality that all his clients probably share. You nod, not trusting yourself to explain the full extent of your suffering without sounding like you're auditioning for a tragic play. How much sleep are you getting? Again, probably not really a question. The dark swirls under your eyes could host their own gladiatorial games. There's enough space under there for the entire Colosseum and several smaller amphitheatres. 2 hours, maybe 3 on a good night. Your voice sounds more pathetic than you'd like, but that's probably because you're pathetic right now. Sometimes honesty isn't attractive. Philippos nods with the understanding of someone who's had this conversation many times before with many desperate people in various stages of suffering. Roman medicine giving you everything you need? The sarcasm in his voice suggests he already knows the answer. It's like asking, is the Tiber River clean enough to drink from? Everyone knows the answer is no, but sometimes you ask anyway for rhetorical purposes. You laugh, but it's not a happy sound. It's the laugh of someone who's been told that their chronic pain is probably just bad posture, and they should try standing up straighter and maybe drinking wine mixed with ground-up pearls and prayers to Apollo. Here's where Philippos becomes simultaneously your new best friend and your future worst enemy, often at the same time. I might have something that could help, he says, in the tone of someone who definitely has something but wants to maintain plausible deniability in case you're an informant. Might is Doing a lot of work in that sentence, he disappears into what you assume is a back room but could be a portal to another dimension for all you know. Roman apartments had layouts that defied both logic and physics. You hear the sound of containers being moved, the kind of containers that could hold anything from cooking oil to face cream to substances that get you crucified if the wrong people find out about them. When he returns, he's carrying a small clay pot that looks completely unremarkable. It's the kind of pot that could contain literally anything. Your grandmother might have one exactly like it, storing olive oil or honey, or dead relatives' ashes. This one contains your future, your salvation, your damnation, and your new career path, though you don't know that yet. Opium, Philippos says simply, like he's announcing the weather or commenting on the quality of bread at the market. The word hangs in the air between you like a sage, a promise and a threat all at once. Opium. Even you know that word, and what you know isn't encouraging from a staying alive and not imprisoned standpoint. It's the kind of thing that Roman authorities classify somewhere between extremely illegal and will make an example of you that discourages other citizens from similar experimentation. But it's also the kind of thing that desperate people whisper about in the same breath as words like relief and sleep, and finally being able to think about something other than pain for 5 minutes. Philippos opens the container with the reverence of someone handling something genuinely valuable, which it is, though whether that value is measured in medical benefit, or street price, or years of imprisonment if discovered, is unclear. Inside is what looks like dark, sticky sap. It's the kind of substance that doesn't look like it should go anywhere near a human body, but has been going near human bodies for thousands of years anyway. So clearly someone figured something out along the way. Small amount, Philippos explains, demonstrating with a portion about the size of a grain of rice. Mix it with wine, drink it slowly, start with less than you think you need, because this isn't something you want to guess about, and guessing wrong could mean you stop breathing, which would be bad for both of us. Bad for you because you'd be dead, and bad for me because dead customers don't provide repeat business or positive referrals. The warnings that follow sound like the ancient equivalent of pharmaceutical disclaimers, if pharmaceutical disclaimer were delivered by someone who could get executed for providing the pharmaceutical in question. Don't take it with other substances. Don't take it if you need to be alert for anything important. Don't take it every day unless you want to discover what dependency looks like in an era before rehabilitation programs existed. Don't tell anyone where you got it, who provided it, or even that you have. Don't look at it funny. Don't breathe on it wrong, and just generally be very careful, because this substance is simultaneously medicine and poison depending on dosage and circumstances. And don't take more just because the first amount didn't work immediately, he adds, which seems like important information that probably should have come first. This isn't wine. More doesn't mean better. More means dangerous. More means your family finds you not breathing in the morning, and nobody can explain why. The price he quotes makes your financial situation even more complicated than it already was. It's not that it's expensive in absolute terms, no, it's expensive in this forces me to choose between this potential solution and other necessities like food, heating, fuel, or rent money terms. It's the kind of price that makes you do mental calculations about whether you could skip meals for a week, or whether you could survive without heating fuel if you just wore more clothes, or whether your landlord would really evict you for being late on rent for the 3rd time this month. These are the calculations of desperate people making desperate choices that seem reasonable at the time, and increasingly questionable in retrospect. But you're at the point where those choices make themselves. What good is food if you're too exhausted from pain and insomnia to enjoy eating it? What good is heating fuel if you're too tired to maintain a fire? What good is a place to live if living has become an endurance test that you're failing? The logic is sound if you don't think about it too hard. Very sound. Definitely sound. You're convinced. You hand over the money, trying not to think about what you're not going to be able to afford next week, or the week after, or possibly for the foreseeable future, depending on how this pharmaceutical experiment goes. The transaction feels like crossing a line that you can't uncross, like losing virginity or committing your first felony. Philippos wraps the small container in cloth, then wraps that in more cloth, creating a package that looks like it might contain anything from spices to jewellery to completely legal substances that wouldn't get anyone in trouble. It's packaging designed for plausible deniability, which is a concept you're going to become very familiar with. Be careful, he says, and the way he says it suggests that be careful covers significantly more territory than just don't spill this on your tunica. It means don't get caught, don't tell anyone, don't do anything that attracts attention, don't make me regret this transaction. Don't come back here if you think you're being followed. Don't bring problems to my door. All of this is communicated in 2 words and a meaningful look. You're learning a new language, the language of illegal pharmaceutical transactions and mutual risk management. You leave his building feeling like you're carrying a secret that's heavier than the actual weight of the small package hidden in your clothes. The streets of Rome look different when you're walking through them while possessing something illegal. It's like someone adjusted the lighting and suddenly everything is suspicious. Every person you pass could potentially be someone who'd report suspicious activity to authorities. Every official building you walk past represents a place where people make decisions about what happens to citizens caught with forbidden substances. That merchant over there. Maybe he's actually an informant for the urban prefect's office. That woman drawing water from the fountain could be a concerned citizen who reports anything unusual. Those guys having a conversation in the alley, possibly undercover law enforcement conducting surveillance operations. They're probably not. They're probably just normal people living their lives. But your paranoia doesn't care about probability right now. Roman law enforcement wasn't exactly known for its gentle approach to drug offences. Getting caught with opium wasn't a pay a fine and attend some classes about making better choices situation. It was more of a become an object lesson for other citizens who might be considering similar experiments situation. The punishments could range from imprisonment to fines that would bankrupt you to physical punishment to execution depending on the quantity involved, your social status, and how much the authorities wanted to make an example of someone this particular week. Crucifixion was a real possibility. Not a likely possibility for simple possession, but possible. And not likely isn't the same as impossible, which means you're now walking around with a non-zero chance that your pharmaceutical choices could result in one of the most painful execution methods humans ever invented. Fun times, great life choices, no regrets, many regrets. But you're also walking through those same streets with the possibility of relief tucked into your clothes. For the first time in months or maybe longer, you've lost track. You're carrying hope. Real, tangible, pharmaceutical-grade hope that tonight might be different, that sleep might be possible, that pain might become manageable, that tomorrow might involve less suffering than today. The internal conflict is exhausting. Part of you is terrified about what you've just done. Part of you is excited about what might happen next. Part of you is already planning when and how to use this new resource. Part of you is calculating how quickly you could dispose of the evidence if necessary. It's like being in an argument with yourself where all the participants make valid points and none of them can agree on a conclusion. Your brain is hosting a debate tournament and everyone's losing. Back in your apartment, the opium sits on your table like a very small, very powerful house guest that everyone's pretending not to notice. You stare at it while trying to decide what comes next. Philippos's instructions were clear, but the gap between instructions and implementation feels enormous. Like the difference between reading about swimming and actually jumping into water. Technically you know what to do, but knowing and doing are separated by anxiety and uncertainty. This is the moment where theoretical knowledge becomes practical experience, and practical experience with opium in ancient Rome isn't something you can undo if it goes badly. There's no customer service line to call, no product return policy, and no, oops, let's try that again option if you mess up the dosing. You measure out what seems like an impossibly small amount, following Philippos's demonstration. It's dark, sticky, and smells like nothing you've ever encountered before. Earthy but also sweet, natural but also somehow artificial, promising but also vaguely threatening, like nature saying, this could help you or kill you, let's find out together. If desperation had a scent, this might be it, mixed with ooh, and possibly impending doom. It's a complex fragrance profile. The wine you mix it with is cheap stuff, the kind that Romans called wine mainly out of courtesy. It's the beverage equivalent of calling prison food cuisine, technically accurate but deeply misleading. This is wine that mostly serves to make water safe to drink and provide a minimal amount of nutrition for people who can't afford better options or dignity. Adding the opium turns it into something completely different. Not better tasting necessarily, hey May. Actually, definitely not better tasting. But significantly more significant. This isn't just diluted fermented grapes anymore. This is medicine, or drugs, or both, or neither. The definitions are unclear and probably don't matter right now. You drink it slowly, as instructed, trying to pay attention to any changes in how you feel. It's like being a scientist conducting an experiment, except you're also the test subject and there's no control group and the experiment might kill you. At first, nothing. Then, maybe something? Or is that just psychological? It's like when you're not sure if the sun is actually rising or if your eyes are just adjusting to the darkness. The change is real, but hard to pinpoint exactly when it started. Then gradually, unmistakably, something shifts. The pain in your leg, which has been screaming like an angry mob demanding justice, starts to murmur. It's not gone. It's not even really diminished. But somehow it's less urgent, less demanding of your immediate attention, like someone turned down the volume on your nervous system from 11 to maybe 6 or 7. It's not that your leg doesn't hurt, it's that you don't care about it hurting quite as much. The pain is happening over there somewhere, and you're over here, and there's a comfortable distance between those two facts. And then, remarkably, impossibly, miraculously, you find yourself feeling sleepy. Not the exhausted, wired, painful sleeplessness that's been your constant companion like a terrible roommate who never shuts up, but actual, genuine sleepiness. The kind where your eyelids get heavy not because you're tired, but because your body is actually preparing for rest. Your thoughts start to drift instead of racing. Your body begins to relax instead of fighting itself. The constant tension that you didn't even realize you were holding in your shoulders, your jaw, your everything starts to release. It's like someone found the off switch for your anxiety and pain and insomnia and just flipped it. Not completely off, but definitely to a lower setting. You lie down on your straw mattress, which suddenly feels less like punishment and more like an actual place where sleeping could happen, and pull your collection of blankets over yourself. And then you fall asleep. Not after hours of lying there thinking about how you can't sleep. Not after trying 17 different positions and counting imaginary sheep and contemplating the meaninglessness of existence. Just sleep. Like normal people do. Like you used to do before chronic pain and insomnia became your defining characteristics. You sleep for 6 straight hours. 6 hours. When you wake up, sunlight, actual sunlight, not the apologetic dawn glow you're used to, is filtering through your oiled paper window like a golden promise that life might not be entirely terrible. The quality of light suggests it's mid-morning, possibly even late morning, which means you've slept through the normal waking time and into a territory you haven't visited in months. Your first thought isn't about pain. It's not about cold. It's not about the 1,000 small miseries that usually greet you upon waking. Your first thought is, I slept. The pain in your leg is still there, so this isn't a miracle cure, let's not get carried away. But it's different. Instead of screaming, it's having a civilized conversation at a reasonable volume. Instead of demanding constant attention like a toddler who learned the word why, it's making polite requests for acknowledgement that you can choose to ignore or address as seems appropriate. For the first time in longer than you care to remember, you feel like a human being instead of a collection of problems that happens to be conscious. This is the moment that changes everything. This is the moment when you discover that the distance between absolutely not and definitely yes can be crossed in a single night. This is the moment when you learn that some solutions create new problems, and some new problems are worth it anyway. This is the moment when you stop being someone who uses pain management and start becoming someone for whom pharmaceutical intervention is just part of life. You don't realize this yet, but you will. Here's the thing about opium that Philippos mentioned, but that you didn't really understand until now. It works. Not kind of works, or works sometimes, or works if you believe hard enough and also sacrifice a goat to the right gods. It actually genuinely, measurably works. The pain diminishes, sleep becomes possible, life becomes bearable, and that's absolutely terrifying. Romans built an empire on the idea that suffering makes you stronger, that enduring hardship builds character, that accepting pain without complaint demonstrates virtue. Roman philosophy, Stoicism especially, is all about that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Energy, except less catchy, and with more acceptance of meaningless suffering as somehow noble. Roman culture, Roman values, Roman identity, they're all built on the foundation that the appropriate response to life's difficulties is to tough it out, suck it up, demonstrate your worth through your ability to handle whatever the gods throw at you without crying about it too much. But now you've experienced what it feels like when the pain stops being the main character in your life story. When sleep is something that happens naturally instead of something you fight for every night. When you wake up and your first thought isn't how will I survive today, but rather today might actually be okay. And you want that again. Not in a desperate, immediate way, not yet, but in a this is information that will inform all my future decisions way. You know now that relief is possible, that life doesn't have to be constant suffering punctuated by brief moments of less suffering, that there's a pharmaceutical option for making existence more tolerable. This knowledge is dangerous. This knowledge is empowering. This knowledge is the kind of thing that leads to life changes that future you will spend a lot of time trying to evaluate as either brilliant survival strategy or catastrophic mistake. The next few weeks become a very careful experiment in chemistry and self-deception. You don't use the opium every night. That would be excessive, you tell yourself. Potentially dangerous. Probably expensive enough to create new problems that would defeat the purpose of solving the old problems. Instead, you ration it, saving it for nights when the pain is particularly bad or when you haven't slept for so long that you're starting to see things that probably aren't there and have conversations with people who definitely aren't there. You tell yourself this is medicine, not recreation. You're treating a legitimate medical condition that Roman physicians can't address effectively. This is therapeutic use of a natural substance from plants that the gods presumably created for this purpose. This is problem solving, not drug abuse. These distinctions feel important. They're the difference between being a responsible person managing a health condition and being the kind of person who uses illegal substances for inappropriate purposes and brings shame upon their family. The rationing system works, mostly. On nights when you use the opium, you sleep well and wake up refreshed, feeling like perhaps life is worth living after all. On nights when you don't, you remember why you sought out Philippos in the first place, and why his pharmaceutical solutions feel less like choices and more like necessities. The contrast makes both experiences more vivid. The relief feels more significant because you remember the pain. The pain feels more unbearable because you remember the relief. It's like you've created your own before and after comparison that makes the after seem essential rather than optional. You start to notice things about your opium use that probably should concern you, but that you file away under interesting observations instead of warning signs. Like how you think about it more often than you think about most things, like how you've memorized exactly how many doses you have left with the precision usually reserved for counting money or tracking debts. Like how you've started calculating how long your supply will last and when you'll need to visit Philippos again, and these calculations happen automatically now, like breathing or blinking. Like how you've started organizing your schedule around opium availability. Important tasks get planned for days after you've used it, when you feel rested and capable. Challenging social interactions get avoided on days when you haven't slept, when pain makes you irritable and exhaustion makes you antisocial. Like how you've become an expert at concealing your use from people who might ask inconvenient questions. You know exactly how much time needs to pass between taking opium and appearing in public. You've developed explanations for why you sometimes seem more energetic and clear-headed than usual. Finally got a good night's sleep works remarkably well. You've learned to hide the small container in places where even determined searching wouldn't reveal it. You're developing operational security skills that suggest this is becoming more than occasional medical treatment, but you're not ready to examine that too closely yet. Roman winter is starting to feel manageable, which should probably be more alarming than it is. The pain in your leg hasn't disappeared. This isn't a fairy tale where magic medicine fixes everything and you live happily ever after. But it's no longer the organising principle of your daily existence. It's more like background noise that you can tune out when necessary, rather than a screaming alarm that demands constant attention. Sleep comes regularly now, at least on nights when you allow yourself to use your increasingly precious supplement. The cold is still cold. Your apartment hasn't magically upgraded to include underfloor heating. But being well rested makes everything more bearable. Turns out adequate sleep is like a cheat code for tolerating life's various inconveniences. You're functioning better than you have in months. Your work performance has improved because exhaustion isn't constantly undermining your concentration. Your social interactions are more pleasant because chronic pain isn't making you irritable and short-tempered like a bear with a toothache. Your general quality of life has improved measurably. If this were a modern prescription medication, you'd probably be writing glowing reviews online. 10 to 10. would recommend, changed my life, ask your doctor if Agent Opium is right for you. But this isn't modern prescription medication with FDA approval and pharmacy insurance coverage. This is an illegal substance that you're obtaining through illegal channels and using without medical supervision in an empire that addresses drug offences through methods that range from extremely unpleasant to "we're going to kill you in front of everyone as a lesson." And you're running out. The mathematics of opium dependency are surprisingly straightforward. Like a word problem from school, except the answer determines whether you can sleep or not. You started with what Philippos described as enough for several weeks of occasional use. That was accurate. Assuming occasional means only when absolutely necessary, and absolutely necessary maintains reasonable standards for what constitutes necessity. But your standards for necessity have evolved in ways that would make a philosophy professor write a dissertation about the subjective nature of need versus want. At first, you saved the opium for nights when pain made sleep impossible. Clear criteria. Obvious need. Justified use. Then you started using it for nights when pain made sleep difficult. Still reasonable. Preventive care. Why suffer when you don't have to? Then for nights when you wanted to guarantee good sleep because you had important things to do the next day. Investment in your future productivity. Smart planning. Then for nights when you just felt like you deserved a break from being uncomfortable. Self-care, mental health, reward for getting through another day in ancient Rome without dying. Each expansion of criteria felt reasonable at the time. Pain is subjective after all. Sleep quality affects literally everything else in your life. Taking care of your health is responsible behaviour. You deserve relief from suffering just as much as anyone else does. But the mathematical result of reasonable criteria expansion is that several weeks of supply becomes several days of remaining doses. And several days becomes a situation where you need to decide what comes next pretty damn quickly. The decision feels both inevitable and completely voluntary, like choosing to breathe or choosing to have a heartbeat. You need more opium. You can afford more opium if you make some adjustments to other spending. Food is negotiable. Heating fuel is optional. Dignity is overrated. You know where to get more opium. The only question is whether you want to continue down this particular path or whether you want to return to your previous existence of chronic pain and insomnia and contemplating whether life is worth living. When you phrase it like that, the choice makes itself. Philippos greets you like a customer returning to a shop where they have had a positive previous experience, which is exactly what you are. How did it work? He asks. And the question is genuine professional interest. He wants to know whether his product performed as advertised, whether the dosage recommendations were appropriate, whether you experienced any unexpected side effects, whether you're going to become a repeat customer or a one-time experiment. You describe the results. Better sleep, reduced pain, improved functionality, no major problems. Would definitely use again, 5 stars, highly recommend. You sound like you're providing a product review for ancient Rome's version of Yelp, which in a way you are. Philippos' pharmaceutical solutions. Great product, questionable legality, excellent customer service, will definitely risk imprisonment again. Good, he says, clearly satisfied with your testimonial. You ready for the next conversation? The next conversation turns out to be about logistics, supply chain management, and long-term planning. Topics you didn't expect to discuss with your illegal drug dealer, but that makes sense once you think about it. If you're planning to continue using opium, and your presence in his apartment suggests that you definitely are, then certain practical considerations need to be addressed. First, money. Regular opium use costs more than occasional opium use. This is obvious math, but it's still important to acknowledge. The real issue is cash flow management. How to maintain steady supply without bankrupting yourself or creating financial patterns that might attract unwanted attention. Philippos doesn't extend credit. This is a cash and carry operation. No payment plans, no "I'll totally pay you next week", no IOUs. Transactions are immediate and complete. You bring money, you leave with product, no ongoing relationship beyond potential future transactions. This is smart business practice for several reasons. Debt collection in illegal industries is complicated. Credit creates records that could be discovered. He doesn't know you well enough to trust your financial reliability. This isn't a charity, it's pharmaceutical entrepreneurship. Second, security. The more frequently you visit his apartment, the more likely it becomes that someone notices a pattern. Romans were surprisingly observant about their neighbours' activities, partly out of genuine curiosity, and partly out of civic duty to report suspicious behaviour. Regular visits to the same location by the same person at similar times could attract exactly the kind of attention that's bad for everyone involved. Like moths to flame, except the flame is law enforcement, and the moths are people who made poor life choices. So you need to vary your timing, your routes, your entire approach to procurement. Make it look random even though it's not. Add unpredictability to mask the underlying pattern. Be the moth who's learned to avoid flames while still trying to procure illegal substances. Third, supply reliability. Here's where things get complicated in ways you hadn't considered. Opium comes from places far beyond the borders of the Roman Empire. Eastern territories where poppies grow and people have known about their special properties for thousands of years. The supply chain involves multiple countries, languages, currencies, political situations, and people you'll never meet. It passes through merchants, traders, smugglers, corrupt officials, and various intermediaries, each taking their cut and adding their own risk to the process. It's like a very long game of telephone, except instead of messages getting garbled, your pharmaceutical access might just disappear without explanation. Sometimes Philippos has high-quality product available immediately. Sometimes he has lower quality options that require dosage adjustments. Sometimes he has nothing at all and can't predict when that situation might change because he's just one link in a very long chain. If you're planning to depend on this, Philippos says with the seriousness of someone who's had this conversation before with people who didn't take it seriously enough, you need to understand that dependency works both ways. You depend on opium for pain management and sleep, and opium depends on supply chains that you don't control, political situations you can't influence, and weather patterns you can't predict. The warning is clear: don't organise your life around access to something that might become unavailable without notice. But warnings about dependency sound different when you're already dependent. They're educational rather than cautionary, informative rather than persuasive. The time for deciding whether to risk dependency has passed like a ship leaving port while you're still standing on the dock debating whether to board. Now you're discussing how to manage dependency that already exists, how to minimize risks you've already accepted, how to survive choices you've already made. Philippos offers you a bulk purchase option that feels like signing up for a subscription service to your own gradually increasing problem. The economics are compelling in the way that bad financial decisions often are. Buy more at once, key is pay less per dose, reduce frequency of risky transactions, cause better security. Build reserves against supply disruptions, cause peace of mind. Demonstrate commitment as regular customer yield better service priority. The logic is sound if you're going to continue using opium anyway, and let's be real, you absolutely are. You might as well use it efficiently and safely. The quantity he's suggesting is more than you've ever possessed at one time. It's enough to last for months, assuming your usage remains at current levels, which feels like an optimistic assumption considering that your usage has been steadily increasing since you started. It's also enough to qualify as distribution quantity if law enforcement ever discovers it. Roman legal distinctions matter here. Small amounts equals personal use, or fines, brief imprisonment, public shame. Large amounts is commercial distribution or extended imprisonment, property confiscation, physical punishment, possible execution. Possession of dealer quantities suggests you're not just using, you're selling. And dealing gets you the kind of Roman justice that's designed to discourage other citizens from similar entrepreneurship through graphic demonstration of consequences, but it's also security. Instead of worrying about supply interruptions every few weeks, you'll have months of guaranteed access. Instead of repeated risky visits to Philippos that could establish a trackable pattern, you'll have one very risky visit followed by extended independence. Instead of constantly calculating remaining doses like you're managing a depleting resource in a survival game, you'll be able to use opium as needed without inventory anxiety. You make the purchase, telling yourself it's practical risk management and trying very hard not to think about what it suggests about your expectations for future opium use. The money changes hands. More money than you've spent on anything in months, possibly years. The package changes hands. More opium than you ever imagined possessing, wrapped in enough layers of cloth to cushion a baby or conceal a felony. You leave Philippos' apartment feeling like you've crossed another line, though you're running out of lines to cross and starting to wonder if maybe you've just entered a space where lines don't exist anymore. Having a substantial opium supply changes the psychology of use in ways that are both liberating and deeply concerning. When you had limited quantities, every dose was a conscious decision that required weighing current need against future availability. It was like rationing food during a siege. You had to carefully consider whether today's hunger justified consuming resources you might need more desperately tomorrow. Now that you have abundant quantities, dosing becomes more casual, more responsive to momentary preferences, rather than desperate necessity. It's like having a fully stocked kitchen after weeks of empty shelves. Suddenly you're not just eating to survive, you're eating because food is available and you want it. You start using opium for problems beyond chronic pain and insomnia. Stressful day at work, opium helps you decompress. Social situation that makes you anxious? Opium smooths the edges. Weather is particularly unpleasant? Opium makes it tolerable, just generally feeling like existence is too much today. Opium provides relief. Each expansion feels reasonable in isolation. If opium helps with physical pain, why wouldn't it help with emotional pain? If it improves sleep quality, why wouldn't it improve mood quality? If it makes difficult things more bearable, why should bearability be limited to physical discomfort? The progression is so gradual that you don't notice it happening until it's already happened. It's like gaining weight. You don't see the daily changes, but one day you look in a polished bronze mirror, glass mirrors won't be invented for centuries, and realise you've become a different person. One day you realise that you haven't had a day without opium in weeks, not because every day involved pain or insomnia that required treatment, but because every day involved something that opium made more pleasant. This realisation should probably alarm you more than it does. Instead, it mostly makes you curious about whether this represents a problem or simply an evolution in your approach to personal wellness. It's like that moment when you realise you've been checking your phone every 5 minutes. Is it addiction or just adaptations to available technology? Romans use wine daily without considering themselves dependent on alcohol. They use various herbs and substances for health, mood, and general life-enhanced environment without moral anxiety. Why should opium be different, aside from legal status? The legal status is, admittedly, a significant difference. But laws are political constructs that don't always align with practical benefit or moral worth. Romans have laws about all sorts of things. What citizens can wear, so sumptuary laws, where they can gather, restrictions on assemblies, what religious practices they can observe, bans on the certain cults, who they can marry, complex rules about social class, law-abiding behaviour isn't always the same as right behaviour. Sometimes the law is wrong, sometimes civil disobedience is justified, sometimes you're just making excuses for pharmaceutical dependency and calling it philosophy. The lines blur, they blur a lot. They blur so much that you're not sure there are lines anymore, just a grey expanse where you're trying to navigate without a map. Here's something you didn't expect, you're not alone in this. As you become more experienced with procurement, concealment and use, you start recognising others who've made similar choices. Not through obvious signs, everyone's too careful for that, but through subtle indicators that become apparent once you know what to look for. It's like when you buy a specific car model and suddenly you notice that same model everywhere. They were always there, but now you're tuned to see them. The guy at the market who seems remarkably well rested despite working brutal hours, possible pharmaceutical assistance, the woman who manages chronic pain with unusual equanimity. Maybe she's found the same solution you did. The merchant who's always in suspiciously good mood despite the stress of his business. Could be natural temperament, could be chemical support. You're not making accusations or asking questions. You're just observing, noticing, recognising patterns, and occasionally, very carefully, making connections with others who might share your situation. The social network that develops is like a secret society, except instead of political conspiracy or religious devotion, it's organised around practical mutual aid for pharmaceutical access. It's people helping people solve problems that conventional society doesn't acknowledge or address effectively. Like a support group, except supporting each other's illegal drug use, which would probably not be approved by official support group best practices. Information sharing about supply sources, quality assessment techniques, dosage optimization. Resource sharing, when supply disruptions affect some network members but not others. mutual support during crises that might compromise individual members' security, social gatherings that allow network members to interact openly about topics that must be concealed in broader Roman society, professional relationships that create legitimate reasons for network members to associate with each other publicly, financial arrangements that spread the costs and risks of pharmaceutical procurement across multiple users instead of concentrating them in individual transactions. The community that emerges starts to feel less like criminal conspiracy and more like mutual aid society. It's people who share common needs, common solutions, and common risks. People who understand what you're going through because they're going through it too. People who don't judge your choices because they've made the same choices for similar reasons. There's genuine warmth here, genuine care. These aren't just transactional relationships based on shared illegal activity. They're friendships built on authentic understanding and mutual support. You meet Marcus, who uses opium for chronic pain from a construction accident. You meet Julia, who discovered pharmaceutical sleep aids after exhausting all conventional Roman options. You meet Gaius, who manages anxiety that would otherwise make his work as a merchant impossible. Each person has a story. Each story is different, but they all share the common thread of finding relief through methods that society criminalizes and conventional medicine doesn't provide. It's surprisingly wholesome for a drug network, which is probably not something you expected to think about illegal pharmaceutical coordination. The transition from user to consultant happens so gradually that you don't realize it's happening until it's already happened. One of your network members, a woman named Claudia who you've known for about a year, approaches you with a question. Her brother is experiencing similar pain and sleep issues. He's heard that she's found something that helps. He wants to try it. She wants to know if you can help him get access. This is the moment where you transition from being a consumer in an illegal market to being a facilitator, coordinator, consultant, and possibly dealer, depending on how you want to define terms. Your first instinct is to refuse helping. Yourself is one thing. Helping others is expansion of responsibility, risk, and moral complexity. You're not ready for that. You didn't sign up for that. You're just a person managing their own medical needs through unconventional channels. But Claudia is persistent in that way that comes from watching someone you love suffer unnecessarily. Her brother needs help. You have knowledge and connections that could provide that help. Why wouldn't you assist? The logic is compelling. If opium helped you, why wouldn't it help others in similar situations? If you've learned how to navigate pharmaceutical access safely, why not share that knowledge? If you found sources and techniques that work, why not help others avoid the mistakes and risks you encountered? You agree to help Claudia's brother, just this once, just because she's a friend and her brother is suffering, and you remember what that suffering felt like. You meet with him. You assess his situation, not with medical training because you don't have any, but with personal experience and observations from your own use. You provide guidance about dosing, timing, safety precautions. You connect him with Philippos or another supplier. You follow up to make sure he's managing okay. It feels good to help. It feels meaningful. It feels like you're using your hard-won experience to reduce someone else's suffering. And then Claudia's brother has a friend who needs similar help. And that friend has a cousin. And someone else in the network mentions that their business associate is struggling with insomnia. And gradually, organically, without conscious intention, you become the person people come to for pharmaceutical guidance. Welcome to your new career as an unlicensed pharmaceutical consultant specializing in controlled substances. It's not what you planned. It's definitely not what you put in your long-term goals when you were younger and had aspirations that didn't involve felony distribution charges. But here you are, and people are depending on you, and you're actually quite good at it. You develop expertise through experience. You learn to assess pain types, sleep disorders, anxiety conditions. You learn to recognize when pharmaceutical intervention is appropriate versus when someone needs different help. You learn the quality control for opium, how to identify good product, how to detect adulteration, how to advise on dosage adjustments for varying potency. You're basically practicing medicine without a license. Except medicine isn't really licensed in Roman terms, and you're definitely not a physician by any conventional definition. Here's something nobody warns you about when you accidentally become a pharmaceutical trafficker. The cognitive dissonance is absolutely exhausting. By day, you're a regular Roman citizen. You attend social gatherings where people complain about taxes like it's a competitive sport. You participate in religious festivals with the kind of enthusiasm that suggests you definitely haven't been committing multiple felonies that would make the gods file restraining orders. You maintain professional relationships and family connections, and all the normal social infrastructure that regular law-abiding Romans have. By night, and honestly by day too, just more secretively, you're coordinating an illegal pharmaceutical network that serves dozens of users, managing supply chains that span multiple provinces, and making decisions that could get everyone involved crucified if the wrong people find out. It's like having a day job and a completely different night job, except both jobs are happening simultaneously, and you can never fully switch off from either one. You're basically living in a constant state of method acting, where the character you're playing is a person who definitely isn't doing exactly what you're doing. It's exhausting in ways that are hard to explain to anyone who hasn't experienced it. Imagine if every conversation required you to constantly calculate. What information does this person have? What questions might they ask? What stories have I told them before that I need to be consistent with? What level of truth or deception is appropriate here? How do I appear normal while hiding significant aspects of my life? Now imagine doing that all day, every day, for years, while also managing chronic pain and pharmaceutical dependency and legitimate professional obligations and normal human relationships. Welcome to your life. It's complicated. It's very, very complicated. The really weird part is how normal the abnormal becomes. After the first year of pharmaceutical involvement, walking around Rome while possessing illegal substances felt terrifying and obvious. You were convinced you might as well be wearing a sign that said, "Drug trafficker, please arrest me for the love of Mars." After 5 years, it feels completely routine. You're more concerned about whether you remembered to buy bread than whether the opium supply you're carrying could get you imprisoned. The normalization is both practical adaptation, you can't maintain constant high alert paranoia for years without burning out, and warning sign that your risk assessment mechanisms have been compromised by familiarity. You've essentially habituated to danger the same way people habituate to any repeated stimulus. The first time you touched a hot stove, your nervous system screamed warnings like it was auditioning for an emergency alert system. The 100th time you carefully handle something hot while cooking, you're barely paying attention. Maybe scrolling through AncientRome's version of your phone, it's a wax tablet and it doesn't have apps. Same principle, except instead of cooking, you're trafficking controlled substances, and instead of burned fingers, the risk is execution. Let's pause and talk about what opium actually does to a human body over extended periods of use, because this is information that Philippos definitely didn't include in his marketing materials. The physical dependency is real and it's not subtle. By year 3 of regular opium use, your body has completely recalibrated its normal functioning around the presence of opioids. Your brain's natural pain management systems, endorphins, enkephalins, all those wonderful neurotransmitters you learned about in ancient Rome's non-existent neuroscience classes, have basically outsourced their work to the pharmaceutical substitute. They were like employees who discovered that management hired outside contractors to do their jobs, so they stopped showing up and started collecting unemployment, which also doesn't exist in ancient Rome, so this analogy is falling apart, but you get the idea. What this means practically is that stopping opium use doesn't return you to your pre-opium condition. It makes everything worse than it was originally. The pain that opium was treating comes back stronger. The insomnia returns more severe, plus you get withdrawal symptoms that are their own special kind of misery. Sweating like you're in a bathhouse but you're actually in your freezing apartment. Shaking like you're personally demonstrating an earthquake. Nausea that makes you reconsider whether living is really necessary. Anxiety that feels like every bad decision you've ever made is having a reunion party in your mind. Muscle aches that make your original chronic pain seem quaint. Insomnia that makes your previous sleep problems look like luxury general feeling that you're dying, though you're probably not, probably. Romans don't have medical terminology for withdrawal syndrome, because Roman medicine hasn't systematized the observation that stopping certain substances makes people temporarily extremely sick. But the experience is well known to anyone who's used opium regularly and then tried to stop. You've attempted reduction several times over the years. The results have been consistently unpleasant enough that you've never followed through completely. It's like trying to quit a job you hate, except the job is inside your body and you can't just give 2 weeks' notice to your neurochemistry. The tolerance issue is mathematically inevitable and practically frustrating. The dose that produced excellent pain relief and pleasant relaxation in month 1 produces moderate pain relief and mild relaxation by month 12. Your body adapts because bodies are frustratingly good at adaptation. Your opioid receptors downregulate. They're like, okay, there's constantly too much of this substance around, so we're going to reduce the number of receptors to maintain balance. Your liver becomes more efficient at metabolizing the drug, is doing its job, which is to remove foreign substances from your body, except this foreign substance is the one keeping you functional. All the biological mechanisms that protect you from overdose also mean that you need increasing amounts to achieve the same effects. It's like your body is playing defense against your pharmaceutical strategies, and your body has home field advantage. This creates escalating supply needs and escalating costs. The financial sustainability that seemed reasonable when you were using small amounts becomes more challenging when doses have doubled or tripled over several years. It's like subscription services that start affordable and gradually increase until you're wondering how you're spending this much on something that used to cost half as much. There are strategies for managing tolerance, cycling periods of use and abstinence, rotating between different preparations, occasionally taking breaks to allow receptor sensitivity to recover. You've tried all of them with varying degrees of success and varying degrees of withdrawal misery. The fundamental problem is that tolerance is biological reality that doesn't care about your preferences, your budget, or your supply chain logistics. Your body is going to adapt to regular opium presence whether you want it to or not. It's very rude about it. There are specific instances over the years that cut through your carefully constructed rationalizations and force you to confront what you're actually doing. Incident 1 happens in year 4 involving a young man named Titus. Titus comes to you through referral from a trusted network member. He's 19 years old, suffering from chronic pain after injury during military service. His description of symptoms sounds exactly like your own condition years ago. You see yourself in him, desperate suffering, seeking relief that conventional medicine doesn't provide. You provide him pharmaceutical access and dosing guidance based on your own successful experience. You give him the safety lectures, the warnings, the careful instructions. You do everything right according to your accumulated wisdom. 6 months later, you learn that Titus has died. Overdose. Whether intentional or accidental, nobody's certain. His family is devastated. The network member who referred him is racked with guilt. And you're left wondering whether providing pharmaceutical access helped someone with genuine medical need or enabled someone's self-destruction. Did you kill Titus? Not directly. You didn't force him to take excessive doses. You provided safety guidance that he apparently didn't follow. But you did provide access to a substance that proved fatal. You did enable his use without medical training or adequate assessment of his psychological stability or addiction risk factors. If you hadn't provided access, would Titus still be alive? Maybe. Or maybe he would have found another source with worse quality control and less safety guidance, and died anyway, possibly more painfully. Or maybe he would have found alternative pain management strategies and lived a long life. You'll never know. You'll carry this uncertainty forever, like baggage that you can't put down. The incident makes you more cautious about accepting new network members, more thorough in screening and education, more aware of the serious risks involved in pharmaceutical coordination. But it doesn't make you stop, because you've convinced yourself that careful coordination reduces overall harm compared to people obtaining pharmaceuticals through completely unregulated channels. Whether that reasoning is sound moral judgment or convenient rationalization that lets you continue profitable activity, you're honestly not certain. Incident 2 happens in year 6, involving a pregnant woman named Julia. Julia has been a network member for over a year using opium for chronic pain. When she reveals that she's pregnant and asks whether she should continue use, you realize you have absolutely no idea how to answer that question responsibly. Roman medicine has vague ideas about pregnancy and substance use, but nothing systematic or evidence-based that's actually useful. You don't know whether opium affects fetal development. You don't know whether discontinuing use would be more dangerous than continuing. You don't know whether the withdrawal symptoms from stopping would create pregnancy complications. You research what limited information exists. You consult with network members who've been pregnant while using opium. You talk to Philippos. You consider consulting a physician, but realize that would expose both yourself and Julia to serious risks. Ultimately, you have to admit to Julia that you simply don't know what's safest for her or for her baby. You provide the information you have, discuss the risks you're aware of, and support whatever decision she makes. She continues using throughout pregnancy at reduced doses. The baby is born apparently healthy but unusually fussy for months, possibly experiencing neonatal withdrawal. There's no way to confirm that interpretation. The experience terrifies you because it demonstrates how far beyond your competence you've extended. You're making medical recommendations about pregnancy and fetal health when you have no training, no evidence base, no qualification beyond personal experience with a completely different medical situation. If something had gone seriously wrong, if the baby had been born with health problems, if Julia had experienced complications, you would bear moral responsibility for providing guidance in areas where you had no business claiming expertise. It's like performing surgery after watching some YouTube videos, except YouTube won't exist for 2,000 years, and surgery is probably a bad idea regardless of your training. Incident 3 happens in Year 7, involving your own family member. Your younger brother Marcus, not the codename Marcus from Philippos' door security, your actual brother named Marcus because apparently half of Rome is named Marcus, approaches you after hearing rumours about your pharmaceutical connections. He's experiencing mild chronic pain and poor sleep. Nothing severe, nothing that's significantly impairing his functioning, just garden variety discomfort of being human in ancient Rome, where medical care is questionable and heating is luxury. He wants to try opium because he's heard it helps, and he trusts you to provide safe access and proper guidance. This is the moment where your two lives collide directly. You have to decide whether to introduce your own brother to substance use that could help him or harm him or both, knowing that you can't fully predict which outcome is more likely. And you refuse. You tell Marcus that his pain isn't severe enough to justify pharmaceutical intervention, that he should try conventional management strategies first, that opium is too risky for mild conditions, that he should really just suffer through it like a proper Roman. He's hurt and confused by your refusal. He knows you coordinate pharmaceutical access for others, the rumours are true. He doesn't understand why you won't help your own family member when you're apparently willing to help strangers. You can't fully explain your reasoning without revealing how conflicted and uncertain you are about the entire enterprise. You can't tell him that you're refusing partly to protect him, and partly to protect yourself from the guilt you'd feel if pharmaceutical access harmed someone you love more than it helped them. The incident damages your relationship with Marcus. It also forces you to confront an uncomfortable truth. You've created a moral framework where you're willing to take risks with other people's health and safety that you're not willing to take with people you personally care about deeply. That double standard probably indicates something important about your actual beliefs regarding whether pharmaceutical coordination is genuinely helpful or potentially harmful. If you really believed you were providing unambiguous medical benefit, you'd have no reason to refuse to help your brother. The fact that you do refuse suggests that beneath all your rationalizations, you harbour serious doubts about whether you're ultimately helping people or hurting them. The question keeps you awake at night, which is ironic because you have pharmaceutical solutions for insomnia that you refuse to think about too deeply. By Year 8, you've become comfortable, which is exactly when everything goes wrong. Because the universe has a sense of humour, and that sense of humour is cruel. One of your network members, a man named Gaius, who you've been supplying for about a year, gets arrested on unrelated charges. Theft or fraud or something, you never get the complete story, because nobody wants to explain too much in case anyone's listening. But during his arrest, authorities search his apartment and find his opium supply. This immediately creates multiple problems that cascade like dominoes falling in slow motion while you watch in horror. Gaius now faces possession charges in addition to whatever he was originally arrested for. He knows about you and about other network members. That information could be valuable to authorities if he decides to cooperate in exchange for leniency. Your security protocols suddenly feel inadequate against the possibility of intentional betrayal by someone who has complete operational knowledge. The security protocols that were designed to protect against accidental discovery or random law enforcement activity weren't designed to protect against someone actively providing information to authorities. It's the difference between a lock on your door protecting against opportunistic theft versus protecting against someone who has a key and knows where you keep the valuables and is actively cooperating with thieves. You learn about Gaius's arrest through the network's early warning system. Other members who hear rumours, see official notices, or have connections that provide advance information about law enforcement activity. The information arrives quickly enough that you have time to respond, but not enough time to respond carefully or thoughtfully. You have hours to make decisions that will determine whether the network survives or collapses. The crisis management decisions you make in those hours are: first, secure or dispose of physical evidence. The opium supply you've been maintaining for network coordination suddenly transforms from valuable asset to dangerous liability. It needs to be hidden, distributed to users who have secure storage and personal use justification if discovered, or destroyed before it becomes evidence. You choose distribution, giving it away to trusted users who can claim personal use if questioned. It wastes the least product and provides the most benefit to people who've come to depend on supply reliability. It also increases exposure by involving more people in the emergency transactions. But every option has costs, and you're choosing the option with costs you can maybe manage. Second, warn other network members. This requires contacting people through channels that might be compromised while communicating information that's explicitly incriminating if intercepted. You develop warning messages that are vague enough to maintain deniability, but specific enough that recipients understand the nature and urgency of the threat. Our mutual friend has encountered legal difficulties that might affect our other friendships. Take appropriate precautions. It's not exactly masterful spycraft that would impress anyone from any intelligence agency ever, but it's the best you can do under pressure when you're terrified, and don't have training in operational security beyond try not to get caught. Third, prepare for the possibility that Gaius cooperates. This means developing cover stories, preparing explanations for potentially suspicious activities or associations, and considering whether you should preemptively reduce your visibility by changing routines, avoiding usual locations, or even leaving Rome temporarily. The paranoia level required for effective crisis management is exhausting and possibly excessive, but the alternative is being unprepared when law enforcement shows up asking questions that you don't have good answers for. Days pass with no obvious law enforcement response, which is somehow more stressful than immediate confrontation would be. You don't know whether Gaius is cooperating or protecting the network. You don't know whether investigations are happening quietly, or whether the whole crisis will resolve without affecting anyone except Gaius. You don't know whether you should continue normal operations, or whether maintaining any pharmaceutical activity right now is dangerously reckless. The uncertainty is paralyzing. Every person you see could be an informant or investigator. Every unexpected sound could be authorities arriving to arrest you. Every message from network members could be the one reporting new arrests or compromised operations. You find yourself using more opium during this period, despite your previous commitment to avoiding drug-enhanced stress management. The irony is no longer amusing. It's just the reality that pharmaceutical dependency means you reach for pharmaceutical solutions even when the problems are created by that same pharmaceutical involvement. After 2 weeks of anxious waiting, you finally receive information about Gaius's situation through a network member who has legal connections. Gaius pled guilty to his original charges and received a moderate sentence. The opium possession charge was apparently handled as a minor addition to his primary offence, rather than as a separate major case. And most importantly, most incredibly, most mercifully, there's no indication that he provided information about suppliers or associates. Whether Gaius protected the network out of loyalty, or because cooperation didn't offer significant benefits, or because he was never asked, or because of some other reason, you don't know, but the result is the same. The network survived this security breach without cascading exposure. The relief is profound but temporary. The crisis demonstrated how vulnerable the entire operation is to random events that you can't control or predict. One person's unrelated legal problems nearly destroyed something that dozens of people depend on, and that you've invested years of effort building. It's like discovering that the building you live in is held together with hope and architectural prayer, and one strong wind could bring the whole thing down on your head. The question becomes, is pharmaceutical coordination sustainable long-term, or is it inevitably doomed to catastrophic failure? Are you managing risk successfully, or are you just gambling with increasingly bad odds? By year 9, you've helped hundreds of Romans access pharmaceutical treatment for conditions that significantly impaired their quality of life. You've built sustainable systems that provide ongoing support for chronic medical needs. You've developed expertise that makes pharmaceutical self-treatment safer and more effective. You've created community that provides mutual aid and support for people who would otherwise be isolated in their suffering. You've also violated numerous laws, participated in organised criminal enterprise, and enabled drug dependency in people who might have been better served by learning to manage their conditions without pharmaceutical intervention. Both descriptions are accurate. The moral calculation requires deciding which aspects of your activity matter more. Romans built an empire on specific values: virtue, duty, self-control, acceptance of life's difficulties as character-building experiences. Your pharmaceutical lifestyle represents rejection, or at least modification of these values. But Roman values also include practical wisdom, effectiveness, and reasonable adaptation to circumstances. Managing chronic pain and insomnia through pharmaceutical intervention could be classified as practical wisdom rather than moral failure. The same behaviour can be framed as weakness or wisdom depending on which cultural values you emphasise. The actual consequences of your choices are measurable. Better pain management for users, improved sleep quality, enhanced functionality, increased legal risk. But their moral significance requires interpretive frameworks that aren't objectively determinable. You spend a lot of time thinking about these questions, usually late at night when opium has reduced your pain enough to allow philosophical reflection, but not enough to eliminate awareness that the philosophical reflection is happening under chemical influence, which probably says something important about the nature of drug-influenced philosophy, though you're not sure what exactly. Are you helping people or hurting people? Both? Neither? Does it depend on which specific people we're discussing? Does intent matter more than consequences, or do consequences matter more than intent? If you're trying to help but sometimes causing harm, does that make you well-intentioned but incompetent, or something more complex? If Roman pharmaceutical prohibition is unjust policy that prevents people from accessing effective medical treatment, then violating that prohibition is civil disobedience and possibly moral obligation. If Roman pharmaceutical prohibition is reasonable public health policy that protects citizens from dangerous substances, then violating it is criminal activity that exploits people's suffering for personal gain. You've become comfortable with moral ambiguity in ways that younger version of yourself 9 years ago would find disturbing. Current version of yourself recognizes that life in ancient Rome, life anywhere, life anytime, requires compromises between ideals and practicality, between what should be and what is, between abstract principles and concrete benefits. Perfect moral clarity is a luxury that people in difficult circumstances can't always afford. Sometimes you have to make choices without knowing whether they're right, and sometimes you have to live with the consequences of those choices without ever knowing whether different choices would have been better. It's not satisfying, it's not comfortable, but it's honest in ways that simple moral certainty isn't. The story doesn't have an ending because life in process doesn't have endings. It has a present moments that connect to unknown futures through decisions we make with incomplete information and uncertain outcomes. You're still coordinating pharmaceutical network in ancient Rome after 9 years of involvement. You're still dependent on opium for pain management and general functioning. You're still navigating legal risks and ethical ambiguities. You're still helping people and sometimes harming people and existing in moral grey spaces that don't resolve into comfortable certainties. Some nights you lie in your considerably more comfortable apartment than the one you had 9 years ago. Pharmaceutical coordination has been financially rewarding, which is either evidence of successful entrepreneurship or proof of exploitation depending on your perspective. And wonder what your life would look like if you'd never sought out Philippos that first winter. Maybe you'd be worse off. Still in pain, still exhausted, still struggling with conditions that conventional medicine couldn't address. Maybe you'd be better off. Not dependent on illegal substances, not exposed to serious legal risks, not morally compromised by years of pharmaceutical trafficking. Probably you'd just be different, facing different challenges and different choices and different consequences. The opium continues to work, which is both the problem and the solution. It still reduces pain, it still improves sleep, it still makes life more bearable. 9 years of continuous use haven't eliminated its benefits, though they've definitely increased its risks and certainly increased your dependency. You take your evening dose, carefully measured out of habit, mixed with better wine than you could afford 9 years ago, consumed in an apartment that reflects the financial success of an illegal pharmaceutical career, and feel the familiar effects beginning. Pain that's been demanding attention becomes background noise. Anxiety about all your life choices becomes manageable. The complicated moral questions about whether your medical provider or drug dealer or both or neither become less urgent than the simple fact that in this moment you feel better than you would without opium. That's what 9 years of pharmaceutical journey has taught you. Better is relative, morality is complicated, legal and right aren't the same thing, and sometimes the most honest answer to difficult questions is, I still don't know. The Roman winter can use outside your warm apartment somewhere in the city. People are suffering with pain and insomnia that might be helped by pharmaceutical intervention they don't have access to. Somewhere in the Empire, authorities are planning enforcement operations against pharmaceutical networks like the one you coordinate. Somewhere in the future, consequences of your choices are waiting to manifest in ways you can't predict or control. But tonight, you're warm, comfortable, pain-free enough to rest. And that has to be sufficient. You probably won't survive forever, but tonight, you're surviving better than you would be otherwise. And for better or worse, that's become your measure of success. The story continues tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days after that until it doesn't. You're living in the middle of your life, not at the beginning where everything seems possible, or at the end where everything gets evaluated in retrospect. You're just here, now, making choices that seem reasonable with the information you have, trying to help more than you harm, trying to survive with some dignity, trying to find meanings in complications that don't have simple answers. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all that anyone can do. Or maybe you're just really high right now and everything seems profound. It's honestly hard to tell sometimes. Epilogue. For those awake at ungodly hours, wondering about historical accuracy, before you fall asleep, or before you use this information to justify your own questionable life choices, let's talk about what's real and what's storytelling in this journey through ancient Roman pharmaceutical entrepreneurship. The historical reality. Opium use in ancient Rome was absolutely real. The Romans knew about it, used it, and yes, sometimes got addicted to it. The Greek physician Galen, 129 to 216 AD, wrote extensively about opium preparations, and archaeological evidence shows that opium was imported from the eastern Mediterranean and beyond. Roman medical texts describe meconium, opium extract, being used for pain relief, sleep disorders, and various other conditions. It was legal but regulated, expensive, and primarily accessible to wealthy citizens who could afford imported luxuries. The characterization of it as completely forbidden in our story is dramatic license. It wasn't fully banned like modern controlled substances, but it also wasn't freely available like wine. Think of it more like prescription medications today. Legal with limitations, expensive, potentially dangerous, and definitely something authorities worried about. The social reality. Roman apartment buildings, insulae really were death traps. Multiple stories of wooden construction, prone to fire and collapse, overcrowded, and lacking any modern amenities. The wealthy lived in domus, single-family homes, with hypercaust heating, fountains, and actual comfort. Everyone else froze in winter and sweltered in summer. Chronic pain and insomnia were absolute, only real problems that Roman medicine handled poorly. Treatment options included bloodletting, herbal remedies of varying effectiveness, and essentially, tough it out. Suffering builds character. The gap between rich and poor in medical care was enormous. If you were wealthy, you could afford physicians, imported medicines, comfortable living conditions. If you weren't, you suffered and hoped you didn't die from something preventable. The pharmaceutical reality. The progression from medical use to dependency to coordination distribution mirrors modern patterns of opioid addiction remarkably well. The psychology hasn't changed in 2,000 years. Pain relief works, tolerance develops, withdrawal is miserable, and the line between medical need and addiction blurs gradually. The supply chain description is simplified, but essentially accurate. Opium came from regions where poppies grew, especially around the eastern Mediterranean and Asia Minor, travelled through trade routes, and reached Rome through merchants and intermediaries. The dosing, effects and risks described are based on actual pharmacology. A rice grain-sized dose of opium, about 20 to 30 milliwards, is a reasonable starting amount. The pain relief, sedation, euphoria, constipation, respiratory depression, all accurate. The criminal reality. Roman law regarding drugs was more nuanced than modern drug laws. Possession for personal use wouldn't necessarily result in crucifixion, that's dramatic exaggeration. But large-scale distribution especially if it could be classified as poisoning, or if it involved government officials, could absolutely result in severe punishment, including execution. The paranoia about law enforcement is probably somewhat exaggerated for dramatic effect. Roman authorities had bigger concerns than individual drug users, but organised pharmaceutical distribution that involved multiple people and significant money could attract serious attention. The psychological reality, the cognitive dissonance of living a double life, the normalisation of illegal activity, the moral ambiguity about helping versus harming, all of this is psychologically accurate. People engaged in illegal activities that they believe are justified develop exactly these patterns of thinking. The rationalization mechanisms, the gradual expansion of use from only when necessary to whenever I want, the difficulty distinguishing between medical need and psychological dependency, these mirror real addiction patterns across time periods and cultures. What's invented? The specific character, his story, his network, these are fictional, but they're based on patterns that would have been realistic for the time period. People did seek pharmaceutical relief from suffering. Some did become dependent. Networks of users and suppliers did exist in various forms. The incidents with Titus, Julia and Marcus, these are composite scenarios based on complications that arise in any pharmaceutical distribution network, ancient or modern. The specific stories are invented, but the ethical dilemmas they represent are real. The modern parallels. If this story feels uncomfortably familiar despite being set 2,000 years ago, that's intentional. The opioid crisis of the 21st century follows remarkably similar patterns. Chronic pain that conventional medicine doesn't adequately address, pharmaceutical solutions that work but create dependency, escalating tolerance requiring higher doses, legal/illegal grey areas in pharmaceutical access, networks of users sharing resources and information, healthcare systems that fail people in pain, moral ambiguity about helping versus enabling, economic incentives that complicate medical decisions. The fundamental truth is that humans in pain seek relief, and they'll find that relief through whatever means are available, regardless of legal status or social approval. Roman society, modern society. The details change, but the dynamics remain surprisingly consistent. And now we're back where we started, except everything's different. It's another winter in Rome, year 10 of your pharmaceutical journey. The cold is the same cold that started this whole thing a decade ago. But you're not the same person who woke up in that freezing apartment, desperate and suffering and not knowing that you were about to make choices that would define your entire life. That person was innocent in ways you can barely remember. That person thought in terms of right and wrong, legal and illegal, moral and immoral, like those were clear categories that didn't blur into each other. Current version of you knows better. Or maybe knows worse. It's hard to say. You wake up in your comfortable apartment, genuinely comfortable now, with actual heating and actual furniture and all the markers of success that money can buy, even if that money comes from morally complicated sources. The first thing you do, before you even fully wake up, is take your morning dose. It's automatic now, like breathing, like any other bodily function that you don't consciously think about anymore. You're not taking it for pain today, you're not taking it for insomnia. You're taking it because not taking it would mean withdrawal, and withdrawal is the opposite of how you want to start your day. This is what 10 years of pharmaceutical use looks like. This is what dependency means in practical terms. This is your life now. You have a meeting today with a new potential network member. His name is Lucius. He's in his early 20s, suffering from injury-related chronic pain. His story sounds familiar because you've heard versions of it hundreds of times. It also sounds familiar because it sounds like your story from 10 years ago. You'll meet him, assess his situation, provide guidance if you think pharmaceutical intervention is appropriate, connect him with suppliers if you decide to help him. You're good at this now. You've developed genuine expertise through years of experience. You know how to evaluate pain conditions, how to provide safety education, how to recognize warning signs that someone might not be a good candidate for pharmaceutical treatment. You also know that your expertise is limited, that you're making medical judgments without medical training, that sometimes you get it wrong and people suffer consequences, but you keep doing it anyway, because the alternative is refusing to help people who are suffering the same way you suffered. And that feels worse than the risk of occasionally getting it wrong. The ethical calculation never gets easier. If anything, it gets more complicated the more experience you have. When you were new to this, you could tell yourself that you were just helping a few people with obvious need. Now you're coordinating a network of hundreds of users, managing supply chains, training mentees, making policy decisions about who gets access and who doesn't. You're running what amounts to an alternative healthcare system for people that conventional Roman medicine fails. You're providing a genuine service that improves people's quality of life measurably. You're also a drug dealer. You're enabling addiction. You're profiting from people's suffering. You're breaking laws that exist for reasons, even if you disagree with those reasons. Both things are true simultaneously. The cognitive dissonance never resolves. You just get better at living with it. Late at night, when the opium is working and your mind is clear enough to think, but fuzzy enough to be honest, you ask yourself the question, if you could go back 10 years and warn yourself, that desperate suffering person in the freezing apartment, would you tell yourself to seek out Philippos? Knowing everything you know now about where that choice leads, would you still make it? The answer is complicated. The opium saved your life in ways that are real. Without it, you might not have survived those winters. The pain, the insomnia, the desperation, they were grinding you down in ways that felt unsurvivable. The opium also destroyed parts of your life in ways that are equally real. The dependency, the legal risks, the moral complications, the relationships damaged by secrets and lies. These are costs that can't be ignored. You're better off than you would have been without pharmaceutical intervention in terms of pain management and sleep quality and daily functioning. You're worse off than you would have been in terms of autonomy, legal security, moral clarity, and freedom from chemical dependency. Both assessments are accurate. Which one matters more depends on values you can't objectively rank. Is relief from suffering worth the cost of dependency? Is present comfort worth future risk? Is individual well-being worth legal transgression? Is helping others worth the possibility of harming them? Different people would answer these questions differently, and there's no universal truth that resolves the ambiguity. You think about the people you've helped over the years. Marcus, who uses opium for chronic pain and has been able to continue working and supporting his family instead of becoming disabled by suffering. Julia, whose daughter was born healthy despite pharmaceutical use during pregnancy, who says the opium gave her the pain relief necessary to survive those months. Dozens of others with similar stories of relief, improvement, functionality restored through pharmaceutical intervention that conventional medicine didn't provide. You think about the people you've harmed. Titus, who died. Whether the opium killed him directly or just enabled his suicide, he's still dead, and you provided the pharmaceutical access that contributed to that outcome. Others who developed dependencies that hurt them more than they helped. Others whose lives were disrupted by legal consequences. Others who would have been better off never meeting you. The ledger doesn't balance neatly. Maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe life is just accumulation of choices with mixed consequences, and the best you can do is try to help more than you harm, while knowing you'll never achieve perfect moral clarity about which category your actions fall into. Or maybe that's just rationalization that lets you continue behavior that benefits you financially and gives your life meaning even though it's morally complicated. You honestly don't know. 10 years is in, and you still don't know. The future is uncertain, which is both terrifying and liberating. You could continue pharmaceutical coordination indefinitely, helping people and profiting from their needs, navigating legal risks and moral ambiguities, living the double life you've constructed. You could get caught tomorrow. Law enforcement could discover your network, arrest you and everyone involved, and you could face consequences that range from imprisonment to execution depending on how seriously authorities decide to take your crimes. You could decide to exit the pharmaceutical business, taper down your own opium use, try to return to conventional life without the complications of illegal activity. Though exit plans are easier to commit to than execute, and dependency makes leaving harder the longer you wait. You could die from overdose like Titus. Tolerance is unpredictable, product quality varies, and mistakes happen especially after years of use when caution gets replaced by familiarity. You could build something larger, expand the network, coordinate with other regions, become a significant player in Roman pharmaceutical distribution. More profit, more impact, more risk, more complexity. All of these futures are possible. Which one happens depends on choices you haven't made yet and circumstances you can't control. The only certainty is that tomorrow you'll wake up, take your morning dose, and continue living in the complicated reality you've created. Whether that's success or failure or something that doesn't fit into either category, that's for others to judge. You're just trying to survive with whatever dignity and meaning you can maintain. Closing. For you, the person. Listening at 1 a.m, so here we are at the end of a very long story about drugs, pain, choices, and consequences in ancient Rome. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You've either successfully used this to fall asleep somewhere in the middle, or you're still awake and possibly questioning your own life choices. Both are valid responses. The point of this story, if there is a point, which is debatable, isn't to glorify drug use or condemn it. It's to recognise that human beings in pain seek relief through whatever means are available. That relief often comes with costs, that those costs are sometimes worth it and sometimes not, and usually it's impossible to know which until years later. That we're all making choices with incomplete information in situations that don't have clear, right answers. That morality is more complicated than we'd like it to be. That suffering is real, and relief is real, and the relationship between them is messy. Whether you're dealing with chronic pain yourself or insomnia, or just the general difficulty of being alive in circumstances that feel unbearable sometimes, you're not alone. People have been facing these challenges for thousands of years. They've been finding solutions, some good, some bad, most somewhere in between. They've been doing their best with what they have, making mistakes, learning, surviving. You're part of that long human tradition of muddling through difficulties without perfect guidance or clear answers, and maybe that's okay. Maybe that's all we can expect. Perfect moral clarity is rare. Perfect solutions don't exist. Perfect choices aren't available. What we have is complicated reality and our best attempts to navigate it with whatever wisdom, compassion, and courage we can manage. If this story helped you sleep, great. If it kept you awake thinking, also great. If it made you uncomfortable, that's probably appropriate given the subject matter. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here in the middle of the night when most people are sleeping and we're awake thinking about ancient Romans making questionable pharmaceutical decisions. You're my people. All of you insomniacs and night thinkers and people who can't sleep because pain or worry or just general existence keeps you awake. May you find rest when you need it. May you find relief from suffering that doesn't cost more than it's worth. May you make choices you can live with, even if you can't be certain they're right. And may your pharmaceutical suppliers, if you have them, be reliable and trustworthy. Whether they're modern pharmacies or ancient Roman drug dealers named Philippos. Sleep well when you can. Survive well always. Be kind to yourselves. The Roman winter continues. Life continues. We continue. That has to be enough. Historical note: what happened to opium use in Rome? For those curious about the actual historical trajectory, opium remained legal, but regulated throughout the Roman Empire, primarily available to wealthy citizens who could afford imported luxuries. Medical use was documented by various physicians, most notably Galen, who prepared complex opium formulations for pain relief and sedation. The Roman medical establishment recognized both therapeutic benefits and addiction risks. Texts warn about dependency and withdrawal, suggesting that Romans understood these complications even without modern pharmacological frameworks. After Rome's fall, opium knowledge persisted in the Byzantine Empire and Islamic world, where physicians continued to refine its medical applications. European medicine eventually reincorporated these practices during the medieval period and beyond. The fundamental dynamics of opium use, pain relief, tolerance, dependency, withdrawal, have remained consistent across cultures and centuries. Only the legal frameworks, delivery methods, and social contexts have changed, which suggests that maybe we're all just Romans trying to manage pain in a world that doesn't make it easy, separated by 2,000 years and very little actual progress in solving the fundamental problem. But at least we have better heating now, most of us anyway.